We are live yet again for number 8, I believe. Number 8 of Sunday night Q&A sessions. Give everyone a moment just to, if there's anybody here that's going to log on and watch this live. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you've had a great week. Oh, brilliant, we've got some people coming. I hope you had a great week. You've been doing lots of practice, you've been making lots of music. I've had another gig today, which is amazing. So things are beginning to start happening again with the mighty Asa Murphy and band. We did a kind of a charity benefit for a place in Walton Vale that got broken into. It's a charity shop that got broken into, which is really bad. You know, I mean, it's pretty poor, isn't it? But it was a great event. It raised some money, and we got to play. Great to see the band. Great to see Asa. Also nice to have an electric guitar around my neck once again. And it's good. It's good. It feels good to be making music with other people as opposed to making music remotely, which is equally cool. And that's something else that I've been doing a lot of this week. I finished one track from my own album, recorded a solo myself on a track, which one of the things that I played over the previous weeks, but it's now finished. So there's 2 that are done, and I also recorded a track for a collective of London-based gypsy jazz musicians who are putting together an album as a benefit for some of the venues that are really struggling. I mean, that's the thing that is maybe most concerning is how the venues, because of course we need the venues. It's it's a symbiotic relationship. The venues need the musicians, and the musicians need to survive, but the musicians need the venues to survive. So we're putting together this album, a compilation album with lots of different artists, and I got to record a solo on an old Django tune. Well, it's actually not written by Django. It's a excuse me. It's a song that Django recorded, but it's an old standard called Viper's Dream. He's very much made it his own, so I think a lot of people consider it to be one of Django's tunes. So, as always, or certainly in recent weeks, what we've done to begin, I'm going to play you a tune. I'm going to play you something. So I'm going to play you this. I'm going to play you Viper's Dream. This is something that I've been practicing and working on and so on. And I recorded the solo on it yesterday, so it's fresh in my memory and so on. So I thought I'd just run it by you. This is a condensed version. I've edited it down because there's myself and a guitarist called Harry Diplock playing on this tune. So this is just the sections with my solo. He's yet to do his. He'll be doing his soon, I'm hoping. So anyway, here's Viper's Dream. It's Mark Rose on bass. He plays, once again, as always, plays a killer bass solo. And Chris Quinn on rhythm guitar. Yeah, these are just ideas in progress. I hope you like it.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Ta-da! There you go. Check this out from the co-op. About 3 or 4 years ago, discovered this amazing thing, which we used in the rhythm section of a band to annoy the singers, the 3 singers of this band, and we'd be playing these silly things in between at the end of songs and whatnot. But there you go. So I hope you like that. That's kind of a Django Reinhardt style tune. I played it on this guitar just because that's what I've got in this room. On the recording, I'm playing Salmins style guitar, like a Macaferry style acoustic guitar. It's kind of like a different thing, but essentially it's a C blues, but I hope you like it anyway. I approach it with some sort of more modern ideas, I guess, like as if Joe DiOrio had taken up Django style, you know, that's kind of where I'm coming from, I guess. So there's some more intervallic things, there's a few more sort of bigger leaps in the lines, as it were, and they're things that we can cover maybe in future weeks. Forgive me. If it's something that anyone's interested in, just drop us a line, drop me a question, or just suggest some topics. I really need some input from you guys. So, you know, please, you know, comment, share, like. It really helps. And if you've got any questions, you know, however simple or complex it might seem, I'm sure we can find some common ground that will be of interest to everyone. So please keep asking. So with that in mind, let's get on to the questions this week. There's 3 topics that I want to look at, and they're all really interesting. From my perspective, it's interesting for me to see the kind of things that you guys are working on, and to see if I can find a way of helping, if possible, and in the process helping myself as well, because there's no better way to clarify your own thinking than try and explain, sort of rationalize what you do to someone else and see if it makes sense. Because if you can do that, then it's really helpful for you sort of streamlining your own ideas to make sure that you really understand what's going on, you know, because sometimes you might think you're doing one thing when in reality you're actually doing something else. So, so our 3 topics this week are to do with harmonics. So there's something that I use quite a lot, based upon, I mean, it's like a homage to the amazing guitar player Lenny Breau. I think he was Canadian, or certainly, or maybe born in America but lived in Canada. Unbelievable, just in so many different ways, you know. But the harmonic thing is something that really stands out. The harmonics is probably the easy thing about Lenny Breau's playing, actually. I'll touch upon the stuff that's a little bit trickier maybe a little bit later on. He does this thing rather like Bill Evans does, where he plays melodies on the treble strings. So he might play a melody using these fingers, but at the same time as he's doing this, he'll accompany himself with these fingers. So doing this kind of polyphonic, it's invented a new way to pronounce that word, polyphonic approach, where he's got the comping 37ths with the middle 2 fingers, and then with the outside 2 fingers to be able to play lines. This kind of thing, and it's pretty tricky to do. It's like rather like the way a piano player would play 2 things at once. So maybe if that's something that you're interested in, that's something we could look at again in future weeks. The harmonic thing, it's very tricky, but it's kind of the easy bit for Lenny Breau's playing. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of players, myself included, have really kind of explored that area. If you put a bit of time in, it's, you know, it is accessible. Like any of these things, there's a difference between something being difficult and or something being unfamiliar. They're 2 different concepts, and sometimes we consider something to be difficult, but in actual fact it's just unfamiliar. So I would imagine find speaking Japanese immensely difficult, but if I'd lived in Japan for, you know, any extended period of time, it would maybe seem less so. So then the question is it that it's difficult, or is it that it's unfamiliar? Now obviously something like Japanese, for someone who speaks English as a native language, is maybe not that similar. So that would be rather like if you're a blues guitar player and you're looking to pick up jazz, then there's so many similarities between those two things. Rather like if I wanted to learn to speak French, most French words, or certainly a huge percentage of French words, or more the other way around, most English words come from French, so it's not that difficult to make the transition, as opposed to if you're a blues guitar player and you decide you want to really get into playing, you know, Baroque classical music, or you want to learn about traditional Indian music, say, for example, then I think there's probably going to be a more steep learning curve because there's less points where the two collide. There's less, you know, if it's a Venn diagram of ideas where you'll find stuff in the middle. But anyway, I digress, but hopefully these kind of, you know, these thoughts, I'm hoping that they're interesting as well as the playing, you know, as well as the notes. For me, certainly, thinking about music and thinking about the learning process is sometimes even more fruitful than actually picking up the guitar and practicing. Sometimes it's about, like, if you get it square in your mind what it is you're trying to do before you do it, then actually doing it's the easy bit, really. But sometimes the problem we have is not entirely sure what we're trying to do. So we can spend some time just poking about in the dark, hoping for the best, you know. And whilst that's fun and that's really cool, so long as you're paying attention, whilst you're doing that, you can often discover things by accident, you know, stumble across stuff. And that's cool as well. I would never discourage any method for learning. They're all good. But some of them tend to be a little bit more, shall we say, dependable. Like, so if you plan a target and you work towards targets and you break things into lots of small pieces, then you're generally guaranteed to make progress. It may not necessarily be as fast as you want it to be, but you'll definitely be making progress. But some of this is like based upon personality. Maybe it's based upon age as well. You know, so you might find one of the benefits you get as you get a bit older is well, the downside is you've got less time and less, so it's difficult to focus and immerse yourself in an idea. The upside is usually by the time, you know, you've got a few years behind you, you tend to realise the benefit in having some kind of structure and a plan. And if you sort of set out to do something to plan the journey beforehand, usually works. Whereas trying to impress that upon teenagers is quite difficult, you know. So you have to sort of be careful if you're a teacher. Like, you have to sort of embed some of these things if you're teaching younger people, like, so that they're implicit in the learning, so they don't actually realise they're doing it a lot of the time. Whereas, you know, to have like a sort of an explicit method and go, we're going to do this and it moves to this and it moves to that and so on, and be patient, that's something maybe that requires a certain amount of commitment to the learning process, and usually requires a little bit more, shall we say, with all due respect, wisdom and experience just of other things. You know what works for other things, so it's going to work for music. Anyway, on to the other ideas. So we've got harmonics. It's one thing we're going to look at. We're going to look at some uses for diminished, what diminished is all about. And the third thing we were going to look at is being able to hear what you play. So maybe, which one should we start with? We'll do a technique thing first. So this is less, like, it's more physical, less cerebral. There's not really a great deal to sort of like get your mind around in terms of, you know, understanding like a concept or a theory or a construction or what have you. Whereas when we look at some of these other things like diminished scale, then we've got to worry about the formula and what makes it diminished and where can you use it and so on. Harmonics are more like a physical technique. So knowing that something's a physical technique as opposed to cognitive skill, although of course they're all connected, will have some influence as to how you might go about practicing these things. So with motor skills, and what we're going to look at in a moment is mainly motor skill based, although when I practiced these things I tied them in with more cerebral things. When I was learning back many years ago, when I was expanding upon my knowledge of chord voicings, I would go through all the voicings that I knew in a given key, but I would play them using artificial harmonics because it slowed me right down. And if I was playing a voicing, so for argument's sake, say I was looking at this voicing, yeah, we'll look at this voicing here, so like a D major 9 but over an A, excuse me. that kind of voicing. And then I try and play it in harmonics. But as I'm doing so, I'd call out the intervals. So I go, that's the fifth, that's the root, that's the major third, that's the major seven, there's the nine, and there's another fifth. It's a bit of a stretch, this one. You've got like 2 notes with the thumb. But it's beautiful. I hope you agree, it's a beautiful chord. And I did that with everything. So all the chord voicings that I was working on, I was kind of using my brain, using my ear as well to try and anticipate what they sounded like, and then also embedding a bit of technique. So it wasn't just something where I switch off and watch the TV and not really think. But so this idea of combining different disciplines in one exercise maybe is another topic. So there's a bit of ear training if I'd sing them. I won't subject it to my singing, maybe a little bit later on. But understanding what makes it what we think it is, and then also a technical thing, is like a kind of a balanced practice. Then there's loads of things happening. Okay. So anyway, let's go back to just the raw mechanics. We'll work on the basic principle that we know what harmonics are. Harmonics being the overtones that you find whenever any, in this case, string vibrates, but you find it in tunnels of air, you find it in, you know, vibrating skins and things like, you know, tubular bells that are struck and whatever. Anything that vibrates in waves, and there's the wave of the entire length of a string, which gives you the tone that we hear. So in this case, say A, and then that can be subdivided into halves, thirds, quarters, and so on. So when you play the harmonic at the 12th fret, it's half, so that's now 2 vibrations, and you can prove this by bouncing on the string and bouncing on the string, and it's still ringing. So that's telling me that that point that I'm bouncing on is not moving. So you're probably not going to see this, but the A string, now with the pick, I'm going to push on the 12th fret, and it's still, the harmonic still rings. If I do that anywhere else, kills it dead. So what's happening is the strings ringing on either side, and you get this bell-like pure sound, in this case an octave higher than the original note. You divide the string into 4, you get another octave again, divided into 3, you get an octave in the 5th, and on it goes, divided into 5. So, and that's why you can find them in all these different places. So when you divide into 4, you get it there, but you also get it there as well. So these distances are all equal, give or take the diameter of the string. I think that's why the bridge is slightly slanted. Okay, but for today, I'm going to do nothing other than the 12th fret harmonic, I would think, perhaps. I mean, maybe I might sneak a few of these others in there, but for the most part. So most of us know how to do this, because we've done it to learn how to tune the guitar. But at some point, this is a 2-handed technique. One hand to energize the string, in this case with a pick, and the other hand to choose the note which stops the string from ringing in its entire length, but allows the other part to ring. And it doesn't matter which side of the string you pick it from, because it's equal on each side. So the string doesn't know if it's a left or a right-handed guitar. If I could take this pick up and put it there, and I do this, the same note will come out either side. You know, if you could have a mad guitar with 2 body on either end, you know, the same note would ring on each side. Okay, so, and that's a cool sound, but it's a bit cumbersome and not really movable, because both of our hands are spoken for, as it were. So we need to find a way to make these harmonics happen with one hand. So one way to do this is to point at the 12th fret, bosh, and pick from underneath. With a kind of like a flicking motion. Now you can do this with a thumb, or the other direction with a finger. Oh, like so. Both of these things work really well. Either direction is going to work well. It depends, I guess, which way you're moving across the guitar. Like so there, I'm going to play an E chord. I want to play the high harmonic, so maybe I'll come from above. But if I wanted to move this way, it makes sense to come from below. I use the pick rather than the fingers. Lenny, Breau used the thumb pick, and you find a lot of players that have really made this their own, the harmonic technique, like Chet Atkins, who was an influence on Lenny Breau. Players like Tommy Emmanuel, they're mainly thumb pick players. I know Tommy flirts with a flat pick at times as well. But the beauty, of course, of a thumb pick is that you can use the thumb pick and the first finger. With a flat pick, we have to hold the pick between the thumb and second finger and point with the first finger. Now, the trick to this is keep the first finger really straight, because what we're going to have to do is we're pivoting around a point. If the finger's bent, as you go to pick, the tip of the finger moves. So that finger needs to stay straight, and then everything else pivots, swings underneath. So that way it doesn't move away from the target, which is the 12th fret. If that makes sense. So before you do anything, make sure you got that down. Now, of course, you can shape to follow chords. For example, I'll follow an E chord. I move 12 frets away from each of the notes. And that's the kind of thing Django would do when playing melodies. So say Django had this to play. He might follow that with 12 fret harmonics, so he gets, like so. So if you listen to any of the solo pieces, they're called improvisations, but they're really just solo pieces. The first one I think was improvised. Or you listen to usually what he plays on the tune Nuage, you're going to hear a lot of that kind of action, you know, where he's playing melodies an octave higher by playing harmonics in that way. Now, that's a cool thing to be able to do, to follow whatever you've got, you know. Okay, but where things really begin to sound like almost like not like a guitar is when we start putting it into chords. All right. So here I'm going to play as straight a line as possible to make things really easy for the harmonic notes. If you play a chord like this, or something that really sticks out, you know, it's got a lot of shape to it, that chord. For me to follow that with harmonics is a bit of a kind of a task, because I've got to trace the same shape. And whilst that's not impossible, it's not the most practical. I'd much rather do this, you know, which is a chord that's essentially a straight line, give or take a few little diversions. Okay, so the chord I'm going to base all the studies on to begin with is this. For a minor, it's going to be an A minor, just a straight line across the 5th fret. And I'm going to put a 9 on the top, so it's A minor with an 11 and a 7. So it's like an A minor 7 with a 9 and an 11, which makes it an A minor 11. Okay. And the reason why I'm doing this, there's two things at work here. One of them is I'm trying to avoid shapes that have got an abrupt contour to them. Although, you know, you can have your moments there where if you're preparing something, then it's fine to use those kind of chords, but it's going to slow you down a little bit. And I'm also trying to avoid instances where there's an octave, where there's two notes that are an octave apart, and that will become clear in a moment. Okay, so here's our A minor 9. So now I'm going to play this in harmonics, every note an octave above. Beautiful, yeah? And then reverse way. So that's the first thing to do, is make sure you can do that. And you know, you can jump around in that song. And that's a cool sound, and that's a nice effect, but in and of itself. Okay, so that's maybe, you know, the next step is make sure you can do that. And I wouldn't move on until you can do that. It's pointless trying to do anything more complex than that. Make sure you can do that and get it clean and clear. Make sure the notes are ringing out and whatnot. Okay, so once you can do this, what we're going to explore is the idea of adding in some regular notes. Now, this is a tricky technique because we have to play with the harmonic with two fingers, the second finger and the index finger. That's what does this. But what we can do with another finger, maybe the third or the fourth finger, is I can play some regular fretted notes. So I'm going to play this note as a harmonic, the C is a harmonic, and at the same time I'm going to pluck the B just as a regular note, and it's going to give me this effect. So that's two notes together, and then I move it across a string. Kind of Chet Atkins type thing. And Chet to do melodies, you know. Those kind of things. So what you're getting is two notes, one which is a harmonic and one which isn't. And the fact that they've got different tones gives us this kind of unusual, almost like bell-like type sound. And you can move that around. You can keep the note stationary, this high note, so that's not going to move, and go. Move them around. Okay. Or you can do things like trills. Good luck with transcribing that one, by the way, trying to write that down, yeah? So I'm trilling. That kind of an effect. Or we can separate them, and this is where the kind of the cascading effect you might associate with Tommy Emmanuel, but trust me, look at Lenny, bro. Lenny did this stuff first, you know. So what Lenny figured out is that if you go, and you, instead of going bosh, boom, together, you play the regular note first, and then the harmonic, you can create like a scalar effect. That type of sound. And of course you would put that through different chords. That type of sound, yeah, okay. Beautiful, yeah? Okay. So what's happening there is we're picking certain chord shapes, and I'm deliberately picking shapes that avoid octaves. And the reason why I'm avoiding octaves, if say I play a regular, just keep catching my shit on this. If I play a regular A chord, okay. If I play the regular note and then I play that octave, I get unisons. And that's not, unless that's the effect you're after, where you get the harmonic and the fretted notes at the same pitch. Maybe nicer to pick different pitches, like so. So there's an A major chord, a bit of a kind of a tricky fingering, but each note is a unique note. So we're like root, fifth, major seventh, major third, sixth, and then you might say, well, the octave again, but it's two octaves away. So in this case, you don't play the two notes together. So there we're going to get seventh and root together, third and fifth, and sixth and seven, yeah, and all these kind of interesting combinations of notes. So I would suggest, if you can, if you play chords where there's not doubling of notes, especially in octaves, this is going to work nicer. So for major, a nice selection could be this chord. The major with a 6 and a 9 and a major 7 on the top, and that gives us, for minor, like a minor 9, 11, which is where we started from. Yeah, that's another nice major one as well. And then for dominant, maybe dominant 13, this kind of effect. And then also dominance, whatever you want to play. Yeah, there's a whole, you know, explore the chord voicings themselves, maybe again on a topic for another day. I want to just think about the technique here really today. Now, okay, so what we can do, there's a cool thing we can do to extend these even further. and that is we can add like a kind of a ladder, a bass ladder to the sound, right? So say we'll do it with this chord. So with harmonics, we're going to get this. If I go D string, E string harmonic, G string, A string harmonic, B string, D string harmonic, E string, G string harmonic, and so on. You get that beautiful sound, almost like pentatonic with a 9 in there. And then we can add an upper ladder, like so. So that's just those 2 notes, because we've run out of extra strings to play the open notes with. Of course, you go looking for the 2-octave harmonics if you wish. So I'm going to suggest this. Now this is a really tricky technique, but it's worth persevering with. I'm going to add the bass notes. I'm going to go. You catch that? Okay, so what I did, I'll do super slow. Now what you've got to do here is a little sleight of hand thing. So this is like one of those technique things you can practice away from the guitar. I find if I'm getting frustrated at not practicing for a while, if I'm out of the house or whatever, I find myself with a pick in my hands, moving things around, you know, putting it into that kind of the bossa nova position or whatever. And then, you know, so when I'm playing fingerstyle, it goes there a lot of the time. And then for these harmonics, it's going from there, regular picking, index finger, to harmonics and flipping. So what happens here with this particular lick is it moves mid lick. So that's regular picking position. We go pick, pick, flip, like so. So slow again. Pick, pick. Oh, so pick, finger, finger, and then we flip now to the second finger. So it's on the pick's held between thumb and index. Then we play with the middle finger. Then we flip the pick, and then we're ready for the harmonic, like so. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the motion. Allows us to play that kind of lovely, beautiful bass move, you know. Got it? And that gives us these extra low notes, these regular notes, first harmonic, boom, and then we're in. So. Hope that makes sense. Now what we can do, you know, as I mentioned before about you can do some sneaky things sometimes with 17th fret and 5th fret harmonics. So for example, the very first chord that I started with was a D major 9 over A. So if we play an E major 9 over B, it's this kind of sound. And you get this. These harmonics. It's a bit tricky, but I've discovered that the harmonics you get at those frets where you don't fret anything are the same as what you get when you. So if you fret at the 7th fret and you play 12th fret harmonic, you're getting a B and an E, but you get that anyway without bothering fretting those notes. So there's certain positions like so, but that's actually a 17th fret harmonic. Not a 12th fret, and it makes this fingering easier. Of course, that only works in certain keys, but you know, every little helps. You know, I've been practicing a lot of double bass recently, every day, sort of religiously playing the double bass, and I played electric bass for as long as I played electric guitar. And what's really interesting with playing the double bass is there's such an abundance of open strings going on, where if you can play an open string pretty much at any point, you're going to play it. And check out you know, the original version of So What, and see how the bass is being played. You know, it's the open D, it's not the D here. You know? So you'll use open strings because they're in tune, and it gives you a break from fretting notes or from fingering notes. Of course, there's no frets. So in a way, this is a bit like that. There's certain lucky keys where you've got some harmonics that you can use without fretting any notes, which is quite cool. Okay, so we've dealt with the harmonic with fretted notes mixed together. So here's a B minor, say, And then the 2 notes at once, those kind of things, or even 3 notes at once. We're using more fingers. Lenny would do these things where he takes a chord, say like D major 9, and do stuff like this to get a cluster. And there's, like, in that case, there's 3 notes ringing, 4 notes ringing, in fact. So, may have gone off. Oh, we're back on again. I'm actually using the finger that's holding the pick to pick another string at the same time. Lenny, of course, would do this with a thumb pick, so he's got these available fingers. I'm doing it with every available digit, I think. Is it? Am I? Oh, no. Oh, yeah, I am, yeah. Yeah, I am. Those 3 fingers picking a string each, and this one picking the lowest harmonic to give us that kind of effect. Now, another thing we can do, because these are basically like pentatonic scales, right, almost, like if I do this, that's a pentatonic scale. Beautiful though it is. I could fill in some gaps to give us the diatonic scales, like. Now, one of the ways you can get all the available notes is with pull-offs. So you can do things like, so we've got, in this case, a C and a B, and then pull off to the A, and then we have a G, and then say we're playing C major scale, I can play an F, pull off to the E, so now that gives me a whole C scale. That's kind of the thing Tommy Emmanuel's doing. Those kind of effects, and that's a nice effect, of course. So that's something that I think is really worthwhile playing around with. I really like that one, the Lenny Breau thing, where you might do a trill and then play clusters of 2 or 3 notes. So combining, breaking them up, you know. We're playing some notes together. So I'm hoping that this might give you some ideas. As I say, stage 1. And I have recollections of, you know, when I was learning all my C major 7s, you know, instead of just going, you know, and then moving through all the various positions and, what am I doing? To going, yeah. I'm moving through the various shapes of going, and then moving to the next shape, and then make the same thing. Make sure that I could do that kind of. Move to the next one. So practicing more than one thing in one go. I'm working on the harmonics. I'm also working on, in this case, chord fingerings, drop 2 voices in that particular instance. So making sure that I can make the connection between more than one idea. Another thing I'd say, just as a sort of a passing thought with harmonics, is make sure if you intend to play these things, right, there's 2 sticking points. If you intend to play these things live, you've got to practice them standing up. You'll find that because it's such an accuracy dependent technique, a millimetre either way here or there is going to make a massive difference. So you might find, like what I did when I first learned these things, when you can kind of like pin the guitar to a specific point, it's not swinging about, you're not moving, it's pretty easy to do. And then you stand up and the guitar starts to move around, and suddenly it all feels 10 times more difficult, sort of exponentially more tricky. So I'd say practice them standing up. I'd also suggest you practice them in tempo as well. You find a lot of players tend to like these things when it's rubato, because they can go, you know, 2, 3, 4. You know, and take their time trying to find these things. Whereas it's nice to be able to go. So on, so things that are inside. Whatever it might be. So that was a chorus of Stella by Starlight, where I'm playing like kind of chords and harmonics, but trying to keep it. Obviously, I'm doing these things quickly, but trying to keep it sort of in tempo, so that it's not like you're pausing at every chord change and so on. And that's tricky, you know, but it's definitely something that responds to practice, and if you can do that, then you can use it in tunes rather than have to wait for like some long extended intro where you can do those things, which is great, you know, but you know, join the queue of thousands of other players that do that. So I think it's nice if you can kind of get these things into things that are at tempo, and also if you intend to play standing up, and practice it standing up. So hopefully that's going to give you some things to while away the lockdown hours. You know, it is a tricky technique. It takes time, but if you take it one step at a time and make certain you got one thing down before you move to the next thing, you should be okay. Okay, so next topic then, if that's that seems like a good point to move on to something else. I've had a lot of different inquiries. So that was Wayne, actually. Wayne said that thing about harmonics, so thanks Wayne for that really great question. I've had a bunch of different inquiries about the diminished scale. Matt has asked me about this, Tony's asked me about it as well. Things to do with the diminished scale. So first off, let's make sure we know what the diminished scale is. So diminished scale is a sequence of tone and semitone steps. So if I play it on one string, it goes in A, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, like so. So it's got 8 notes. It's got 8 notes in it. So in the key of A, B, C. So we go root, second, flat third, perfect fourth, flat 5, flat 6, natural 6. So there's like 2 6s, or there's 2 5s, depending upon how you see it. It's got a major 7, and it's got an octave. Now, of course, in diminished harmony, we call this a double flat and 7th, presumably because that's a 7th. So the argument being there's not 2 7s, but no matter what, you're going to get 2 of something because there's 8 notes and we've only got 7 intervals. Right, that's the way this is going to work. So we have to share a letter name. So if I give that letter names, that's going to be A, B, C, D, E flat, F, G flat if you want, G sharp, or F sharp, or then there's 2 Fs, and then G sharp, then there's 2 G. You know, so if you call it G flat, then you're going to call that G sharp. So no matter what you're going to end up with, you're going to have some enharmonic anomaly. So my advice is just use whatever's the easiest, like hang whatever's the most theoretically correct. Rather, like if you play this chord and you ask anyone what that chord is, they're going to go E, G sharp, D, and G. But if we were being to the letter of the law, then we should say E, G sharp, D, F double sharp, which is the correct spelling of the chord. But if you go and you notate that melody, I don't see anyone calling that F double sharp in that instance. But that's what it is if it's being used against that chord. So we have to kind of straddle that tricky line of like what's technically correct and what's kind of more practical. So sometimes it's a tricky one, you know. I write for guitar magazines and I'm aware of the fact that, you know, I want to present things accurately, but I also don't want to present something that's unreadable, you know. So occasionally I'll put the prefix, you know, enharmonics respelled for ease of reading to make it easier to actually comprehend. And then other times I'll do it the correct way and say, well, in practice, you know, you might find this being called a G natural because it fits in with the blues and so on. So when you play the blues over a dominant chord, every minor third really should be a sharp 9. It shouldn't be called what we generally call it. So. But anyway, we're digressing, and I don't want to go down too many theoretical rabbit holes, as it were. But they're a fun place to visit now and again. So if anyone's interested, I'm more than happy to talk about this. But back to our diminished. This is kind of a pattern, and it's associated with diminished chords. Right? Diminished chords sound like this. And you know that it repeats in minor thirds because it goes 2 frets and then 1 fret, and then it goes from this point 2 frets and then 1 fret, and so on, to infinity. Okay. So those two things work together nicely. That's the sound that you get when you play those two scales together. So then the question then is, how many songs do you know that have got diminished chords in them? So you practice this, diminished scale against diminished chord. But we have to, and you try it against some songs where it's got diminished chords. Sometimes it just doesn't work. You think, this just doesn't work. These don't sound terrible. This diminished scale is useless, It's not the right scale or whatever, And so the reason for this is, we have to figure out, when is a diminished chord actually a diminished chord? And I get a little sound effect on the go. When is a diminished chord actually a diminished chord? Or when is it actually something else in disguise? Worth its weight in gold, isn't it? There you go. We can put it in a drawer now for another year. A lot of the time when you're playing diminished chords in music, like the tunes that you might know, so we're talking about jazz and blues, those kind of tunes, standards and Beatles songs and whatnot, there's really like two functions for a diminished chord. Sometimes it's acting as an actual diminished chord. It is what it says on the tin. But most of the time, when you see diminished chords in music, they're actually functioning as substitutes for dominant sevenths, and they're not really diminished chords at all. There's something else. They're kind of like hiding a more sort of logical, cadence-based sound. Right. So by this, what I mean, right? If I'm in the key of C, right, and I go C major, D minor, E minor, F major, I'll just go up to A minor, G7, A minor, like so. Okay. What I can do in each instance here, I could play a dominant chord, dominant 7 chord, for every one of those chords. So I can play G7, goes to C. Now my next chord in the progression was D minor. So I asked myself, what is a dominant 7 chord that might push to D minor? And a great dominant 7 chord for D minor is A7. A7 goes to D minor. And that's a clear kind of, logical progression. Now the next chord in our sequence was E minor. What's the dominant of E minor? B7. And then we're going to F major. What's the dominant of F major? It's a fifth away, fifth above or fourth below. C7 goes to F. So that gives us this progression now. G7. So we start on C. C, A7, D minor, B7, E minor, C7, F major, D7, G7, E7, A minor. So this is really a diatonic to C major progression, but we're playing these other dominant chords, and they're referred to as secondary dominant chords. That's what they are. Okay. Now what I can do to make the bass lines move a little bit less of a jagged way, C, A, D, B, E, C, F, D, G, and so on, is I can play these chords in their first inversion. So I can go C major, A7 over C sharp. Now, this is where you need to know some voicings. D minor, B7 with D sharp, E minor, C7 over E, F major, D7 over F sharp, G, E7 over G sharp. Now what you may notice here is we've got a bass line now that's moving either in semitones or it's moving kind of, it's staying where it is. So for example, it's going to go C, C sharp, D, D sharp or E flat, I guess D sharp, the function that we want it to be, E, then E again, then F, and then F sharp, then G sharp, then A. Now if I wish to, I can take these first inversion dominant chords, A7, and I can put a flat 9 in there. Ooh, that looks a bit like what we might think of as a diminished. So now these diminished chords can be used for connection. Really, when you see that chord in a tune, C major, C sharp diminished, go into D minor, that's not really C sharp diminished. Just try C sharp diminished scale against it. See how you think that sounds, you know? Because you're going to get this. This kind of like semitones on either side of where you're going to. It's going to sound pretty weird. I mean, you can make it work. You can make anything work. But really, that's not where this scale's coming from. This isn't a C sharp diminished sound, really. It's really an A7. Like this sound. That's where that's coming from. Likewise, I'll keep going. C sharp, so C, C sharp diminished, D minor, D sharp diminished, or is it? No, it's B7. That's what that is. It's a B7. So a lot of the time, I'd say, hazard a guess, 75% of the time, maybe even more, right? When we see what we think are diminished chords in harmony, they're actually disguised dominant sevenths. They're 5-1 resolutions. Like we saw it weeks ago when we looked at Wes with all that. Those kind of things, you know, which we think of as being diminished minor, diminished minor, diminished minor. But really it's E7, A minor, 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 5-1, 5-1, 5-1. So you might be thinking at this point, well, when is it actually a real diminished? So at what stage is it a diminished? I'm going to show you just one example to begin with, or maybe two. Okay. So if you think about when something's, what the actual term of diminished means, it means taking something that you have, a quantity of something, whatever it might be, and then losing some of it, making it scarcer. So, you know, if your funds diminish, you've got a certain amount of money, some of it's gone, you've blown some of it, you've got less, right? So the concept of a diminished harmony in its two forms, you have a sound, major perhaps, minor perhaps, and certain notes in that sound become smaller, and that's how you get the diminished sound. So if I take a chord like B flat, at least we'll try this to begin with. There's B flat, B flat diminished. So when you see the one chord go from one, in this case major, to one diminished, this is when this is actually a true diminished sound. And that's where this whole step, half step scale is going to work. It works in minor dominant as well. Okay. Now, check out at this stage, you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, now's a good idea to hit pause. Make sure you come back though, and go and check out Peter Bernstein's analysis of Stella by Starlight, where he thinks, and I think, I've got to be honest, I think he's right, the way that we've learned to play it is like there's a with an E half diminished as the first chord, and then it's with A7, C minor to F7. He argues it's this. B flat diminished, da da da, major, B flat major, and that's where we hear. This diminished one chord to major one chord, and this is when its function is a true diminished. Okay. So because this chord is not the 5 of B flat major, it's an alternative version of the 1, right? So we might think, okay, very good. Where does that happen? Right? What tunes do you find that happening? And you will find them actually. There's some Beatles songs. Go looking, right? You'll find them. There's some Beatles tunes that do that one diminished and so on. Very often, what you find, a lot of these jazz composers, they use it in a much more kind of slicker way. Right? So if you know the tune "All the Things You Are," that's a good example. Right? To just quote but one of many numerous tunes that do this. Okay, the last 8 bars of "All the Things You Are" go with an A flat. It goes 4, 4 minor, 3, flat 3, diminished, 2, 5. So check out a tune like Bluesette as well, that does it. Even those sort of turnarounds you hear in the blues that go. Those kind of things. Right, so what's happening here? We have 4, 4 minor, 3, or is it? Flat 3 diminished, 2, 5, 1. Okay. Let's simplify what that could be. That could be 4, 4 minor, 3, 1 actually. Because the 3 and the 1 are the same thing. Harmonically speaking. C minor, A major 7, A flat major 7, sorry. C minor, A flat major 7, C minor, A flat major 7. They're the same thing. What does it go to next? Well, we could call that one or two things. You could call it like C flat diminished or B diminished. Well, now what do we know about diminished chords? They move in minor thirds. Wow, okay, cool. So that's actually 1 diminished. That's going 4, 4 minor, 1, 1 diminished. Because then it goes to the 2, to the 5, 1. So this chord is not the dominant of this chord. It's got nothing to do with it. It's not the dominant of that chord at all. In fact, the way to figure out from a diminished chord is what are the potential dominants, right? Is to lower each of the notes by a semitone. So if we have, so we take this voicing, C flat diminished. To help my brain, I've had a gig today, I'm tired, I'm going to call it B, if that's okay. Right, so if that, we call that B diminished. Okay, and each of the notes, I'm going to do this enharmonically as simply as I can. So please don't put a comment and say it should be this sharp or that flat. We're just going to call it as we see them, okay. B, okay, and then we might call that A flat, D, and F, okay. If I lower the F semitone, I get an E7. Okay, that's what that is. D, that's a D flat or C sharp 7, third inversion. Okay. That's a G7. And if I load the B, it's a B flat 7. So each of these chords, this could be seen as being B flat 7, flat 9, which is not the dominant of B flat 9. Okay. Is not the dominant of it. Okay, it could be G7. That's not useful to us either in this move. It doesn't. G7 does not lead us to B flat minor. What were our other choices? Dog D flat. Neither does that. And the last one was E7, which again, it's a tritone away, but it doesn't lead us to B flat minor. It would lead us maybe perhaps to B flat 7, but that's not what it is. It's B flat minor. Okay. So in every instance there, they're not the chords we need, whereas if I see that as being A flat diminished, we have that move, Peter Bernstein's diminished move. So I would suggest you go looking to see if you can find both of those instances of the diminished chord in harmony. And that's quite theory heavy. I'm aware of the fact that's quite a lot of stuff, so maybe I'm going to just park that one there for now, and then we'll look at some of these sequences. You know, so here's A diminished, and we can play the scale. The problem is the scale's a sea of notes, whereas you start playing intervals. In fact, maybe we'll look at this now, and I'll deal with the here and everything that you can play next time, because I'm on this topic. So how to actually get melodies out of this is to break it into thirds. Triads. Sevenths. All that kind of stuff. Fourths. Now some intervals are easier than others. Anything that's based on thirds or multiples, it's parallel. So an interval like a sixth is relatively easy because it's the same interval each and every time. Flat fives are the same every time. There. Whereas an interval like a fourth isn't, it's going to go from a perfect fourth to a major third. It's actually a flat four, but let's call it what it is. Flat four, perfect fourth, flat four, major third, perfect fourth, major third, perfect fourth, major third, and so on. And all those jazz cliches, you know, that you hear, like those kind of lines are based on those type of ideas. So what I suggest you do with this, so whilst they're all great, you know, and spend some time making sure that you can do all of them, you know, and you'll find some cool parallel line things like major sevens that you hear guys like Breau-Style, Don Mock and all those players using. Those kind of things. So that's based upon the fact that you've got a major 7 interval, and then that can be played in minor third. So, or you've got a perfect 4th interval, but then it's not a perfect 4th, but then it is. So you've got a perfect 4th in minor thirds, and this is all that kind of Mike Stern stuff. Those kind of things. Michael Brecker. So it's kind of a cool way of playing diminished and it not sound like corny or diminished arpeggios and so on. Now, whilst that stuff's really great, and I think that you should spend some time playing around with those diminished sequences, it's super cool. A really nice thing to do is to take a small piece of the scale and just phrase with it. So, for example, what you've got is a 6-note motif. That. Okay. So this is something that I might practice with. Just that. It's a major triad, yeah? In fact, there's also... So you've got a major triad there, like 5th, tonic, major 3rd. You've also got a minor as well. That's maybe another thing that we can get into, all this kind of the triadic potential of diminished. It's one of those scales, there's more notes in it than there are not. There's 8 notes, so it's got more stuff in there than there's not in there. So you'll find major and minor and diminished moving in minor thirds. But if you just forget about thinking in that way, let's just think that's what you've got to play with. That kind of thing. So this repeats in minor thirds. So anything I can play here. Replicated in minor thirds. Make sense? Okay. So it can also be played in perfect in flattened fifths. Sorry. So say I'm going to play a specific phrase. That's the phrase I'm going to play. Exact same phrase around. Even Layla, you know. So now I can improvise with it rather than it being like patterns, yeah? So again, any multiple of minor thirds, you can play the same pattern. So I can move this up a minor third, or a flat 5, or down a minor third, up an octave. So that's a 6th. So that's from here to here. In fact, that's the fingering. Layla. And on it goes, you know? So this way, we begin to start to hear, and this ties in a little bit with what we'll talk about next week with Tony's question about hearing what you play. So if I can play this, I forgot what I played to be honest, but if I go something like this, wouldn't it? freer now than playing even. So great though those things are, I'm not really improvising. Whereas if I go, that's a little bit of a kind of a freer thing. So there, what I'm doing in this instance is just not necessarily playing every note. So even though the whole scale is, what's stopping me from going those two notes and those two notes? I'm not playing this note. Layer there. Or this note and this note, missing the middle note. Those kind of patterns will whiz around the neck. I'm just moving. So on and so forth. So I'm hoping that this might give you some just some ideas to play around with. So the first thing, just to recap, making sure that, like, is diminished what we think it is? So analyze when you see a diminished chord in a piece, what it really is. Is it actually functioning as a diminished seventh? Meaning it's sounding like the one going to one down. And you hear that in tunes like Donna Lee when it goes, yeah. F minor, C7, F minor, B diminished, really? It's A flat diminished, it's also F diminished. So really it's going F, C7, F minor, F diminished, 1, in this case F. So when you see it where it could be the relative minor, it's the same as the relative majors, the diminished is the same. So if I'm in A flat, the diminished is A flat. If I'm in F minor, the diminished is F diminished, which is A flat. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. So check out a tune like Bouncing with Bud, it happens in that. Check out All the Things You Are, it happens in that. Check out Bluesette, it happens in that. Check out a million of those gypsy jazz tunes that when you hear something going, so within G, it goes. Oh, nice, we get the right fret. That's what's happening. B minor, is it? No, it's a G. B flat diminished, is it? No, it's actually G diminished. A minor, well that's what it is. D, so really that's going 1, 1 diminished, 2, 5. G major scale, G diminished scale. If not, you know, try playing, if you play Dorian against that, you're going to get, which, you know, it's not unplayable, but if you're going, that's really, at that speed, that's really sounding like 1, flat 3 diminished, which is 1 diminished. It's the same thing. So I'm hoping that it probably raises more questions than answers, as a lot of these things do. But I'm hoping it's going to give you something to while away those hours over the next week, whilst we figure out what the next step is. I hope you're well. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying motivated. Thank you so much for your indulgence and for getting this far. If you got this far, well done. I promise I'll look a little bit more into these patterns as we progress over the weeks. Let me know, guys. Please let me know what you want me to look at. Yeah, I really do need that to happen, because it's the only real way for me to know that these things are going across well, and that the pacing's right, and that they're placed in the right place in terms of the kind of things that you're interested in looking into, and the sort of the questions that we've all got. I think the only reason why I've kind of figured that this particular thing out is because I saw it happening in tunes. I was trying to play over all the things you are, and I wanted to figure out what to do. What do you play over this? Other than the arpeggio, right? You just play the diminished arpeggio, and that always just sounded like a cop out to me. To be fair, I didn't know what scale, I didn't know where it was coming from harmonically, where was it functioning, until I actually kind of looked at it for real and went, okay, is it anything else? Is it actually something else in disguise? And I would say, in all the things you are, this chord is not flat 3 diminished, it's 1 diminished in its first inversion. That's what it is. Likewise, this chord is not 3 minor, it's 1 major 7 over the 3rd. That's really what it is. And in fact, try it, try playing some D flat, major Lydian or whatever, some kind of minor thing, harmonic major if you want, whatever you feel like, depending upon whether you make that a minor major 7. A flat major scale, just the A flat major scale, A flat diminished scale over those changes. It works perfectly. Don't be scared of using the major scale as well. I mean, that's another topic. Don't be kidded by these guys that sometimes they try and cloud things with everything has to be some complex thing, and like the unhippest thing ever to play would be the major scale. Well, in which case, Charlie Parker and Sonny Rollins and all those amazing musicians, Miles and all that, then they're playing unhip stuff because they're playing the major scale all the time, and just making it sound super cool, and all, not to mention all the classical composers. If you want to hear the major scale delivered in a formidable way, then to listen to Mozart for like 5 minutes, and you'll see that it doesn't have to sound like a nursery rhyme. It can sound like the most majestic thing you've ever heard in your life, So, sometimes we can overcomplicate our thinking by assuming that it's more complex than it might be. And if you can make the major scale sound amazing and the things that come from it, then hopefully by association you'll be able to make all these other things sound cool. If you struggle to make something simple like the major scale sound cool, then throwing more complex formula at it's probably not going to help. If anything, it's going to make things worse, I would think. I'll leave you with that one to ponder for this week. Thanks so much. I'm hoping that at some stage we'll see you out there on a gig, and you can come and we can come and play in the street or whatever, like I did today, which is fantastic. Or even better, I can come see you guys play, which would be great. So take it easy, take care of yourself. Thanks once again. Spread the word, please, and keep sending some questions in. I look forward to seeing what challenges you want to throw in my direction next. See you next week. Take care.